as you guys know, really the hardest thing about voter registration isn't registering voters, because in reality, I mean, it's filling out a piece of paper and getting it turned in. The hardest thing about voter registration, as you guys have already found, is convincing people why it's so important to vote. And I'll give you a couple of instances why. So one is there was a race in Tulsa for a state Senate seat just a few years ago, and that race was won by 29 votes. So clearly, every vote matters. Literally, every vote matters. I mean, if you in just your social circle and all your friends voted the same way, I mean, you could potentially turn how an election turns out. So for that reason, you know, try to convince everybody why it's so important to vote, because every vote really does matter. The second reason is a lot of people say, I mean, even my husband says this, well, I'm just one little lonely voice out there, why does it really matter? And the reason it matters is because my vote, it's a leveled playing field. My vote counts the same as your vote, your vote, your vote. We all have one vote. It's our voice. Why would you want to give that up and let somebody else do the choosing for you? So when I put it that way, it seems like for some people the light bulb goes on. Oh yeah, maybe it really is important, because I don't want to squander that one potential I have to be heard. For basic from the ground up voter registration, at this point it has to be done on paper. There is no online voter registration at this time. The state election board is working on it, and I believe what I heard now is it might not be ready till 2021. But they are, yeah, but it is in the pipeline. They are working on it. As of right now, there are only 3 things you can do online. You can register to vote by mail or vote absentee, same thing.
If you've already registered to vote.
If you've already registered to vote.
Get an absentee ballot.
Yeah. You can change your address if you've moved within the same county. So if you move from Norman to Tulsa, then you have to fill out a form. You can change your party. So the one caveat to that is in even numbered years from April 1st through August 31st, you cannot change your party. I don't really know why that is. So for example, this year, 2020, if you have voter registration from April 1st to August 31st, people can't change their parties. So
because people can't jump in and out of primaries to affect the general.
Okay, I get you.
That's why you have to do it outside of that time period.
Okay, that makes sense. So for this voter registration, that at the end of your voter registration, you have this little stack of forms. They have to be postmarked 25 days before an election, because the 24 days before an election, voter registration is closed. If you get your stack of forms, you can either hand turn them in, or sometimes if I'm in a real big hurry, I'll just stick them in a little envelope and then just mail them in. Either way is fine. If you do voter registration, say like at a high school, and you have kids, future adults who come through who say, well, I'm not old enough, I'm just 17. If they are 17 and a half, they can register to vote. They can pre-register to vote. They can only vote if they are actually 18. So the state election board will actually hold on to that voter registration, process it when they turn 18. Yeah, so that's a good thing to have.
Sorry, so
oh no, you're good.
Like 17 and a half, it cannot be just 17?
Correct, it has to be 17 and a half. And actually, when I do voter registrations, drives, I will typically make something like this. You can put it on a little piece of paper, but I do it like this so it's available for all the volunteers, where I calculate, this is calculated from just a few days ago, so obviously you need to recalculate it for whenever your drive is. But I have this so that this way people say, well, I'm only 17, and I say, well, if you were born on or before July 26, 2002, you can register to vote. And then that way, you want to try to minimize any excuse to not register, and that way it makes it easier on the volunteers too, because then they don't have to sit there and try to get on their phone and calculate when, 17 and a half years ago was. So it's just something that makes it a little bit easier.
So does the election board hold on to those? Do they process those?
Yeah, they'll hold on to it and then process it when they turn 18. Yeah. So also, felons can register to vote after they've served out their sentence. So say, for example, they were sentenced to 5 years, they've served 2 in prison, they're now out on parole for 3. In 3 years, they can register to vote. And it's so exciting because I can't tell you how many people, they've looked kind of like a little sheepish, well, I'm a felon, I can't vote. And I tell them, Well, actually, when you serve out your sentence, be sure to make sure you get a voter registration form and register to vote, and the light comes on in their eyes and they are happy. I mean, because they are part of the process, they're not just invisible anymore. So yeah, so felons can register to vote after they have served out their sentence. So absentee voting, there are multiple reasons to do that, and if you aren't already registered to vote absentee or vote by mail, I highly recommend you do that yourself so you can see actually why it is the best thing since sliced bread. It lets you do your research ahead of time, because don't do like me, where in the past I used to show up at the polls and then suddenly there's a whole bunch of candidates, judges, state questions that I have no idea what it's about, and so I left it unmarked, and that's a wasted vote. So you can avoid the lines, especially for big elections like this one in November is going to be, where the lines at the polling place are wrapped around the block. You can avoid that, and you also never forget to vote, because the way absentee voting works, if you aren't already familiar with it, about 2 weeks ahead of an election, you get a nice little tidy packet in the mail that has your ballot in it. All you need to do is fill it out, get it notarized, throw a stamp on it, and you're done. So, and it's nice because then that way you have, all this time where you can try to start to talk to people, figure out how, if there are candidates who have already, been in elected offices, you can see what their voting record is. You can investigate these state questions to see, how valid is it, who's writing these state questions. So you can do your homework and not just be blindsided when you show up at the polls. It's also nice too because then you get because you get it a couple weeks ahead, you won't forget about an election where I've driven down the road and seen signs and, oh, I guess it's election day. Don't do that either, because again, it's a wasted vote. So with absentee voting, you can register either, again, you have to already be registered to vote basic. You can either do that on paper or online. And there's actually a sample absentee form that David developed. And I highly recommend you use that and not the government issued one, because the government issued one is kind of daunting. It's really confusing and it just is kind of a nightmare. This one is stripped down, it's really easy, and it's just a lot easier to deal with. If you want, you can also register to vote absentee up to 5 p.m. on the Wednesday before Election Day. So literally you can do it, days before an election. The only caveat is you do have to re-register to vote absentee every year. You can register to vote absentee for just like one election or several elections or the whole year, but it doesn't just sign you up in perpetuity. You have to redo it every year. Let's see. Absentee ballots have to be notarized, and the thing about it is notary publics cannot charge you to notarize that ballot. They have to do it for free. Banks, tag agencies, I think libraries, all have notary publics who can notarize your ballot. And for future reference, I actually am a notary public, and so I would be happy to meet any one of you anywhere in the metro area. I travel, and I can notarize your ballot, so you can just get it mailed off and be done with it. So if you do have your completed notarized ballot, you can deliver it to the election board up to 5 p.m. the day before an election, or if you don't want to mail it in. They have to, if you do mail it in, they have to receive it, your county election board has to receive it by 7 o'clock on election day to be counted. So once you get it, feel free to fill it in, get it notarized, send it in, and be done in plenty of time, and then that way you don't have to worry about it being counted. If you're registered to vote absentee, this is the great part, is I still like to get my little I voted sticker, and you can still do that. You can still show up at your polling place. All they'll do is they'll have a little note next to your name and they'll say, hey, it says that you're registered to vote absentee. Did you already vote? And you'll say no, because of course you can't vote twice because that's a felony, so don't do it. I don't recommend it. So you just tell them, yeah, I didn't already vote, so you just sign your name in their little book and then you're done. So voting absentee doesn't obligate you to just vote by mail. It gives you all sorts of opportunity to research and to think about the ballot, but it doesn't make you have to